Good morning, everyone. My name is Clarence Lowe with Starforce. I'd like to welcome you to the second of 3 technical assistance workshops designed to help you navigate and respond to the city's consolidated funding for the RFP for fiscal year 24-25. In order to maximize participation, the city has chosen to present this information in a hybrid format. So we have people online and people in-house here. So as you might imagine, that presents a few technical challenges that I think we can overcome today if we can just abide by some housekeeping rules. So let me show that real quick. As I said, these workshops are intended to provide you with the guidance on how to understand and navigate the consolidated request for proposal. Sessions will be recorded, as stated earlier, and posted to the city's website for future access. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the lower left-hand icon for the WebEx. Questions may also be submitted for those of you online via the chat and be answered throughout each session. I'll take hopefully strategic breaks and allow folks both internally and online to ask questions. Hopefully we can get those answered in-house in real time. If not, we'll be presenting those questions to the city for future reference and answering. And this is very important, folks, especially for those of you online. For attendance tracking, please enter the following information in your chat: the first and last name, job title, agency or organization that you're representing, and your email address. So with that said, let's begin. As I said, for those of you who may have attended earlier or yesterday, yesterday's presentation was primarily a general overview of the forms, how to submit the RFP, generally speaking. But today we're going to be doing a deeper dive in some of the more challenging RFP attachments. So let's begin. Just to show you what we're talking about today, as I said yesterday, session 1 was a general overview. Session 2 today is about attachment C, attachment E, and attachment G. The background, your agency background, your proposed plan, how you actually talk about that plan, how you give us the narrative about that plan, explain what it is you want to present to the city as a possible solution to some of the issues that we're facing, and then the overall budget of both the agency and the program that you propose. So if you go to attachment C, for those of you who are in the room or may have it online, let's look at attachment C. And also, just to manage your expectations here, obviously having this hybrid form, it presents some challenges. So there may be a little clunkiness in me going back and forth between the RFP and the slides. So there may be a slight hesitation or delay. So please grant us some grace with that. So I'm going to go to the actual RFP and show you exactly what attachment we're referring to. So here's an exploded view of attachment C, and we're talking about the experience, background, and qualifications of the agency itself. You can see it has a cautionary statement at the top. It says this section of questions request information that is applicable to your agency as a whole. This is not talking about the individual proposed program. Attachment E asks questions which are specific to the program you are requesting funding for. You can see it has a total of 7 different questions. We're going to examine those questions in detail, each one by itself. Let's go back to the slides. As I said earlier, for those of you online, I will be taking questions, and at strategic breaks in time, we'll be trying to collect those questions and provide answers for you. So attachment C is the experience, background, and qualifications. Again, this is about the agency as a whole. Here are the topics we're going to cover: agency mission and goals, financial management, agency experience, and then there's one final yes and no question called the overall agency-wide annual budget? Is it less or equal to 500,000? So let's begin with the first topic here, agency mission and goals. And I'm going to read some of this explicitly so we don't miss anything and everything is totally understood by the respondents here. For agency mission and goals, explain how your agency's mission and goals are inclusive of the proposal's services and how it aligns, and this is very important, folks, and how it aligns with the RFP and the specific long-term outcome priority for which you are applying. Remember, we said yesterday that you will be submitting one complete proposal, one complete submission for each long-term outcome priority. So if you have multiple programs and you feel that multiple programs might apply to a specific long-term outcome priority, pick the program that best aligns with that priority. Again, one submission, because I know in the past this has been somewhat confusing for respondents, but I think the city has kind of listened to some of the confusion or listened to many of the respondents and responded, I think, in a great way to allow this to be a bit easier than it has in the past. So again, one submission, one complete submission for your proposal or your program for each long-term outcome priority. So you're going to check one long-term priority and submit for that specific priority. Again, with agency mission and goals, for example, if applying under LTO long-term outcome number 2, which states, in this case, the priority for domestic violence prevention, explain your agency's experience in working with individuals and or families impacted by domestic violence. Again, pick or choose, select, put a check mark, an X mark, somehow select one long-term outcome priority. The next thing we'll be looking at is the financial management. And guys, we'll be going over each question specifically, okay? This is just an overview of what we'll be covering under this attachment. Financial management. Explain how your agency's financials are reviewed, approved, and the internal controls in place. You're going to be using Exhibit A. We talked about that earlier or yesterday. We'll be talking about that in more detail today. And Exhibit 8 is your strong fiscal and administrative internal control tool. And it'll help you actually not put the numbers, but enable you to create a narrative around your budget. Agency experience. Provide a high-level overview of a previous or current program, something that you're having success with now or in the past. Ensure response speaks to the quantitative and qualitative outcomes achieved throughout that program. For example, explain the number of clients served and how your program contributes to a reduction of, in this case, family violence reports in a particular zip code. Remember, we talked about the Equity Atlas. We'll be talking about that in detail today as well. And in this case, you'll be looking at areas in most cases that have an Equity Atlas score, combined score of 7 through 10, 7 to 10 being the highest. And the last question, this is very important, overall agency-wide annual budget. Is it less than or equal to 500K? This is simply a yes or no answer. Do not skip this answer. It's based upon your overall, or this question rather, it's based upon your overall agency-wide budget, not program budget. I know in the past, let me get some explanation on this. Natalie, can you tell me, is the reason for that to allow smaller agencies, I'm talking about the yes or no question regarding overall budget, less than or equal to 500K, was that to allow for smaller agencies to have the opportunity to, so I am stating that correctly. So guys, please be sure that you answer this question. You'll get extra points in the evaluation process for agencies which have a budget less than or equal to 500K. So you want to make sure that you are able to leverage that position in the RFP. So let's take a look at question 1 in attachment C. It says, describe your agency's mission, vision, and intended program outcomes/results. Explain how your program aligns with the mission of the Department of DHS. Describe how your agency's efforts contribute to a community-centered equity approach. So I know this sounds pretty simple, pretty basic, But start with a blank Microsoft Word document, folks. Get a clean sheet, start from the beginning, and use the naming convention that's in the RFP. In this case, you can see the title of the document being 016 or Section 16, RFP Application Attachment C. Number your answers in the proposal to correspond with the number for each question in the RFP alignment. Ensure answers are provided for each part of the question. In this case, question 3 has 3 different parts. The first part is the narrative to explain your agency's mission, vision, and intended program outcomes, the results to the efforts that you're actually applying to. Secondly, the narrative to explain your mission's alignment with the mission of DHS, Department of Human Services for the city. And then thirdly, and lastly, a narrative to explain how your agency's efforts contribute to a community-centered equity approach. Again, there are 3 sections to this question. Do not skip a section. And I will reiterate to narrate or number your answers in your proposal to correspond with the number for each question in the RFP. Let me take a break. I believe we have some questions. The first question about alignment. Outcome 4, seniors are healthy, engaged, and independent. The strategy says older adults and DHS operate senior centers. What if the majority of older adults we serve are not in senior centers, or we're not able to track that? Let me make sure I understood the question. I may need your assistance on this one, Natalie. Let me make sure we both understand the question appropriately. And folks, for those of you who are online, I'm actually we have people in the city or from the city in the group here, then I can actually approach them with some of the more expert answers here. So the question basically says, outcome number 4, seniors and healthy, engaged, and independent. The strategy says older adults and DHS operated senior centers. What if the majority of older adults we serve are not in senior centers, or we're not able to track that? Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
So the long-term outcome that you're looking at that's related to senior independence, it is primarily designed to provide programming for the senior centers. Now, I want to put that with an exception of, meaning they can choose to make exceptions. And so yesterday, I know this was a conversation I had with another agency in attendance, which basically what I would tell you is the same thing I would tell anyone who has a program for seniors that is targeted at senior independence. If you would have to decide if you want to submit the proposal. We can't give you specific guidance on your proposal during these workshops, but what I would tell you to consider is if you can make the connection to how your program is going to impact seniors at the senior centers, you should consider if you want to submit it, because it could be funded. There is not a hardline rule that says we will only fund at senior centers. That is the focus and intent of the long-term outcome, but I have seen them make exceptions to that rule if they're presented with a program that an agency really designs that impacts the seniors at the senior center with a need in mind. With that said, keep in mind, we're in the no contact period right now, so you can't contact the city or even our senior centers to say, how's the best way to draft this? What you can do is reach out to our senior centers and ask them, what are their programmatic needs? You can get information on what the senior centers are currently providing from a programmatic perspective, because you may be able to connect how your program is going to impact those seniors. So you can reach out. Our senior center, our administrator for senior services is Yolanda Perez. She has 2 managers. You can reach out to them or to any senior center and basically ask if there's one in the vicinity of where your program services are. You could reach out to them to say, can you tell me what are y'all's program needs? Are y'all open to certain programs that we could possibly provide? They can't talk to you, again, specific about your proposal, but they can definitely talk to you about needs they have that can help shape how you connect your program to that long-term outcome. Again, I would still highly recommend you consider if it is worth your time on the proposal to submit. It is aimed at senior centers, but I have seen them bring in a program here or there where the program really speaks to them and they're going to find a way to fund it.
Thank you, Natalie. Folks, if you look on the screen, what I chose to do is go back to the RFP because there is something that I want to reiterate from yesterday that I think might also add to what Natalie said. Remember, folks, this is your proposed program. The city is looking for innovative ideas. So when you look at the actual LTOs or long-term outcomes, as you notice in this case, I'm looking at goal number 4 for, I believe it's LTO number 3. Homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. The priority or goal in this case, well, I'll just use number 1. Goal number 1, homeless youth. There's a statement in each of these demonstrated expertise. You'll see there in the red, information on how proposals will be evaluated for alignment with DHS. Proposals submitted for the evaluation, and it talks about each of these cases, what the city is looking for. Remember, the city is looking for innovation, so it will have a kind of canned statement in each of these cases where it says these particular line items that we have on the proposal or on the RFP are simply examples of what the city might look at or will look at. If you have something that doesn't fall in exactly into the delineation that's in this RFP, obviously, but please submit it. You're not bound by exactly what the city has listed in each of these cases. It says examples of services that could be funded under this goal. I'm looking at, in this case, goal number 3, examples of services that could be funded under this goal, but are not limited to, and they give you a delineation of certain other kinds of interventions. But remember, if you have something that you believe answers this or can somehow leverage the city's ability to achieve success, please submit it. Let's go to the second question here. If you have 2 programs within one LTO or long-term outcome, do you submit 1 application or 2? So let's go back to the page where you'll be selecting those. Here we are. Page 37. So again, you have all of the long-term outcomes, and under each long-term outcome, you have a particular priority. You will select 1 priority. In this case, let's say kinder readiness or college and career military readiness. You select 1 long-term outcome priority, and you will have to choose a particular program that best aligns with that particular long-term outcome priority. If you have several different programs that fall into measure or somehow answers that particular problem, you will have to submit 1 complete proposal for each program separately. Okay. See the next question there, just a moment. Do we have another question online? All right. Can we only apply for 1 priority per LTO? Or if we have a couple of priorities within an LTO, we submit 1 application under the LTO and talk about all priorities within 1 application? No, again, this is kind of basically the same question. 1 complete proposal per program per long-term outcome priority. So again, 1 complete program. If you have several programs and they all answer long-term priority, long-term outcome priority number 1, you're going, let's say you have 4 programs and they all answer, you believe, that priority number 1 for long-term outcome number 1. If you believe all of them answer that particular problem, you're going to have to choose one of those programs or actually submit 4 different complete proposals for each of those programs. I think in this case, it makes it much simpler than it has in the past, trying to figure out which part of the program best applies to a particular long-term objective. In this case, 1 complete proposal per program per long-term outcome priority. And I'll probably mention that a number of times because I know it's somewhat confusing or it's different than it has been in the past. So let's go back to the slides. So again, for question number 1, we have 3 parts. Ensure you answer each part. Still on attachment C, experience or agency's experience, background, and qualifications. Question number 2, describe how your agency ensures the board of directors and programming staff are representative of the population your program serves. So this answer should directly correspond and support to what is on attachment D, organization composition form. We talked about that yesterday. Essentially, the answer to this question, remember this is a narrative answer, is the narrative answer behind what's on this attachment. This is an equity concern, obviously. We talked about equity briefly yesterday. Explain how your board members and organizational staff are recruited and selected, and how the agency ensures the leadership and staff providing services to the clients represent the clients being served. Don't forget, though, to include your attachment D in the proposal as well. Again, this is one of those equity concerns. How are you recruiting folks that work in your organization? Do they really understand the population you're serving? Attachment C. Question number 3, describe your agency's financial procedures to include the financial board oversight and financial statements of assurances. For this particular question, I would strongly encourage you to refer to Exhibit 8. Exhibit 8 is the exhibits for strong fiscal and administrative internal controls. This is going to be a great resource for you to use to create a narrative around these questions. So what this question is basically asking to do is to provide a narrative describing the documented financial processes your agency has in place. Describe the financial assurances established by your agency and how processes are reviewed by the board. If using the exhibit, ensure any procedures checked as yes are explained in this answer. So let's take a look at that exhibit real quick. That might help you. And guys, again, forgive me for the clunkiness here. There's a short delay when going back and forth here. We're looking at Exhibit 8. This is the exhibit I'm referring to, strong fiscal and administrative internal controls. This is a helpful tool when attempting to describe your agency's financial procedures, board oversight, and fiscal controls. This is especially a helpful tool for smaller agencies or newer agencies who have not really gone through the process of actually understanding, I shouldn't say understanding, but really creating a narrative around how they treat or apply their fiscal responsibility. I think we have a question. So to clarify, we can submit one application per each priority if we wish. For instance, under LTO 1, we want to submit an application for priority 2 and priority 4. We can submit one application per priority. Yes, if you have several programs, let's say you have 2 programs and you believe that each of those programs could answer LTO number 1, priority number 1, or priority number 2. Again, one proposal, meaning one program proposal per long-term objective priority. So one proposal, what I would encourage strongly is that you choose the program that best aligns with that particular long-term outcome priority. But yes, that's the case. You need to have one proposal per long-term priority. So essentially one proposal per program.
You can also let them know that one of the reasons we made this adjustment is because some of the learning that we took from our last RFP was that some agencies try to talk about a lot of programs in a single application. And because the page limitation is 4 pages, what we found is they weren't able to really elucidate clearly their programs. And so they can only put a few sentences. And so we went back to, one of the reasons we went back to one proposal per long-term outcome per priority is so that you have enough space to talk about your programs effectively. Because remember, your panels, your target audience of who's going to review your proposals, some of them may know your programs, some of them may have not a single idea. And so I firmly believe you should write your proposal for the audience that you know you're going to have, which is you should assume it's somebody who doesn't know your program. That will give you more space. Now, if you have, I think it's worth, and I think Clarence will probably talk about it, making sure you understand the difference between, sometimes there are components of a single program that are different, like elements. You know, you might have after school tutoring as well as sports enrichment, but they're the same program essentially. That you could still do one proposal, and that's where you would pick the long-term outcome that most closely aligns with what you're saying. But in some cases, you may have such a deeply designed after-school program that it really is its own program, and you want them to consider it separate. That's a case where you could say, okay, this is one program in and of itself under this youth success long-term program, and I want to apply because I want the full 4 pages to talk really about the benefits of this program. So you have some flexibility in how y'all write those proposals. That's really why we have the technical assistance workshops.
Thank you, Natalie. That's very well said. And I think you bring up a couple of very important points. Folks, remember there is a constraint. You have several constraints on writing this narrative. 4 pages in this case, 12-point font. So you need to leverage these to the best of your capacity in building and leveraging your argument. Remember, you're making an argument for your particular proposal, and you have that constraint. So you want to use your space as best as possible. And also remember that you're creating a narrative. This is a whole integrated story. You're trying to tell the story about your program. So a lot of these elements, as Natalie said, need to be in agreement. Okay. I think we have one other question. If you are seeking to fund multiple programs that fall under the same LTO and priority, is that no longer an option? Is there a limit to one program proposal per priority? The last part of that question is yes, again, one program proposal per long-term priority. The first part of that question is no, there is not a limit. If you have multiple programs that answer multiple particular LTO priorities, choose the one that you believe best applies to, or choose the program in this case, that you believe best applies to that priority under the long-term outcome. And you can submit several different programs or several different proposals, but each proposal should reflect a program for that one long-term outcome priority. I know sometimes that's confusing because it is a little bit different than it has been in the past. And I think what the city has done in this case is kind of eliminate that confusion and enable you to kind of leverage your argument in a more condensed, concise way. And we'll probably get a couple of other questions on that. Yes, a question internally.
If you're describing the program success, can you use an article that data that's hyperlinked as well?
Yes, I think that might be smart if you want to do it that way. That does not in any way infringe on the space. Obviously, that's part of the argument that you're making for your program. So that might be something that you can leverage. Sure. Mm-hmm.
I would still put a summary statement or two though, because the panel could elect, exactly like Clarence is saying, it's a good option. You can hyperlink it if you want them to give them the option of more detail. But I would not just say, oh, see this, and then not talk about your success at all. Like I would still make the connecting dots because some of them may not choose to click on it.
It's a good point. Thank you. So for question number 4, still on attachment C, experience, background, and qualifications. Describe your agency's financial controls. We're still talking about finances, folks. Refer to Exhibit 8. We just talked about that, looked at that. Provide a narrative describing the financial controls implemented within your agency. If using the exhibit, ensure any procedures checked as yes are explained in this answer. Question number 5. Provide an example of a successful program for your agency or that your agency has operated within the last 3 years. Again, the last 3 years. What are the quantitative or qualitative performance metrics your agency tracked to determine program impact or success? Was the target population involved in the design and delivery of the program? If yes, describe how. The program may be an existing program or a program offered in the past as long as it's in the last 3 years. Ensure your response speaks to the quantitative and qualitative outcomes achieved through the program. An example of a quantitative outcome in this case would be the number of clients served, the number of sessions held, the amount of dollars in direct assistance provided. Example of a qualitative outcome is the percentage of clients that reported a decrease in anxiety or depression, the percentage of clients with increased access to resources. Now, I may have not said this earlier, but tomorrow's session number 3, we'll be going into a detail, actually someone from DHS will be going through a detailed examination of the performance metrics part of this particular proposal. So please, I encourage you to come back for that. A lot of great important information for tomorrow. Question number 6. Please explain the agency's efforts to implement gender pay parity practices and gender awareness training with agency staff. And then it goes through a definition of gender pay. In this case, is defined as assuring employees in the same job and location are paid relative to one another. I won't take time to read the entire definition. Essentially, what it's asking you here is to provide a narrative describing your agency's gender pay parity policy if one exists. It also goes further to say if a policy does not exist, describe any procedures relating to your agency's recruitment and promotion practices that contribute to your agency's overall gender pay parity to ensure employees in the same job and location are paid relative to one another. Again, we talked about the equity concerns of any or most cities in America right now. We want to make sure that these resources are distributed to individuals and obviously agencies which have equity as a top of mind issue. Question number 7. Is your agency's overall budget equal to or less than $500,000? This is a yes or no response. Do not skip this question. If the question is not answered, as I said earlier, your agency might forfeit or will forfeit its right to any extra points available to agencies whose budgets are equal to or less than $500,000. So please do not skip this particular question. Any questions online? Okay, any questions in-house? Okay, it seems that we have a number of questions and concerns about the LTO objective. So again, I'll repeat, if you're submitting a proposal, choose one program or choose a program that best aligns with what you believe your program answers in terms of those LTO or long-term objectives priorities. Choose one proposal or complete one proposal, submit one proposal per long-term objective priority. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, come back to section E, I believe. All right, welcome back. So we just completed the last question on attachment C. Let's go to attachment E. Attachment E. Let's take a look at the RFP. Here's a look at the attachment E, proposed program plan. This is a large, meaty portion of the RFP that you'll need to answer. So we're going to go to, around this or talk about this in detail. Let me pause for a moment. I think we have a question. Just a moment. Each LTO has subcategories. Perhaps the question is, can we submit multiple applications for LTO 3, homeless families, for example? And can we submit multiple applications for LTO number 3, homeless families, and one for LTO number 3? Folks, remember, I'm not sure I understood this question correctly, but I'm going to try to say this again. I'm not sure if it's making sense to some of you. One, let's say you have, maybe the best way to explain this is this way. Let's say you have agency A and you have 3 different programs and they all answer questions to and respond to and impact a particular long-term outcome. Now, this question talks about the long-term outcome. Remember, you're not applying to the long-term outcome generally. You are choosing a specific priority within that long-term outcome. But let's say you have several different programs and they all answer the question to long-term outcome number 1, priority number 1. But you have several programs that answer that question or impact that particular priority. The city is not telling you how to formulate and how to craft your response. You could take elements from several of those programs and call it Clarence's program. Don't get stuck on the idea that you have one program labeled after school and we need to submit for this particular long-term priority this particular way because we have this one program labeled this. You can create another label that says this is the program that we're submitting. It's called letter X, but you're actually taking elements from certain or other programs and calling it maybe a new program. The city is not telling you how to craft your response in this case. You get to decide that. But again, it is one submission, one complete proposal with all of the attachments labeled in attachment, and we'll go over that again. All of those attachments need to be in each proposal, and you're applying to one long-term outcome priority. But if you have several programs that have elements that impact that one long-term outcome priority, combine those, compile those, collect those, and answer that particular question with a new program, letter X. Okay, does that help for those in the audience? Okay. I hope that helps. Now, one of the reasons for this, folks, is remember, you're creating a narrative and a story to leverage your particular program. The programs or the story needs to be integrated in a way that makes sense. So when you get to, and we'll talk about this, or the city will talk about this tomorrow, when you get to the point of creating performance measures around your program, it's going to be very difficult to create performance measures around several different programs, all answering the same particular long-term outcome, because you're going to be measured by these metrics. Narrow the scope and help you leverage your argument in the best possible way. But we'll probably get questions about this throughout. I'm going to save those. So if indeed you see several questions like that, we'll save those toward the end and maybe talk about that again.
Clarence, real quick.
Sure.
Does the successful program attachment C relate to both?
No, it does not. It's just talking about a program that you had within the 3 years that was a success. How did you craft that? What was the audience?
And it also may
It may relate.
say,
Sure, sure. So let's go back to attachment E. So the purpose of attachment E is in this case fivefold. We're going to talk about the target population here, the proposed program services itself, and the program impact, the organizational capacity and staffing, collaboration, and the quality improvement and innovation of the program. So let's look at the target population. Explain the specific population your program will target, recruit, and serve. Why does this population need your services? Include specific details to include demographics, geographical areas, and circumstances as applicable. Use data from reliable sources, rather, and can the agency collect this data, or it could be agency collected data rather. The target population must align with the scope outlined in the RFP. And we'll take a look at this again. This is about the equity atlas map that you'll be needing to use to receive or to get your combined score. And we'll look at that in detail in just a moment. Secondly, the proposed program services and program impact. Explain how impact directly addresses the LTO priority area. Again, I'm going to keep saying this. You are applying to the LTO priority. There are several priorities within each LTO or long-term outcome. Use evidence-based strategies. Describe the level of impact and number of clients who will be served. Explain the approach to recruit program participants. When and how are services available? Organizational capacity and staffing. Include current staff and positions who will be hired if funded. Collaboration. Explain existing partnerships with other agencies, informal and formal. Quality improvement and innovation. Explain how the program is evaluated and improved. Why is your program unique? Remember, the city is looking for innovative ways to actually impact these problematic areas. You may have something not listed, not delineated in the demonstrated expertise. Please submit that, but be sure you can justify that particular program and how it impacts the particular long-term priority or the strategic area that the city wants to address, or problem that the city wants to address. So question number 1, using reliable data, describe the population identified and needs of service or need of services, the demographics and the geographic area. Provide detailed information about the trends and issues affecting the identified population. Again, use the naming convention, start with a blank sheet, use the naming convention in the RFP, section 16, RFP application attachment E. Number the answers in each of for your proposal to correspond with the number for each question in the RFP. In this case, you're going to be explaining the specific population your program will target, recruit, and serve. Why does this population need the services that you'll be using in the community? Explain the community trends that reflect the specific population. For example, have domestic violence incidents increased over the last number of years? If yes, explain the trend and the data behind the trend. Include specific details to include your demographics, the geographical areas, and circumstances as applicable. If targeting clients residing within specific zip codes or council districts, provide an explanation to describe why you're targeting those particular populations. Very important here, include the equity score for the program services in that particular area. You'll be using the equity atlas map or tool for that. We talked about that yesterday. Use data from reliable sources. This can be agency collected data provided by community or national resources. Population must align with the scope outlined in the RFP. Let's see. I'll take a look at this Equity Atlas map tool in just a moment because I think it will serve to answer some other questions when we get to it. Yes, I'm sorry, we have a question in-house.
Sure. On the codes, I just happen to be looking at priority number 2.
Okay.
Security, and that's under long-term outcome 1,
We're looking at attachment.
2.
I'm sorry, you're looking at,
Number 2,
okay, just a moment.
DHS strategy has zip codes.
You're looking at question number 2 for attachment E, correct?
Long-term outcome number 2, but I'm just looking at where it says DHS strategy and it's showing zip code.
Okay. You're looking at question number 2,
Priority number 2.
priority number 2 or question number 2?
Outcome number 2, long-term outcome number 2, individuals and families,
Mm-hmm.
financial security. Got priority 1 and priority 2. Each of those priorities have DHS strategies and they have zip code.
Okay.
One chance in option number 2 is 78228. I just noticed that it's not there, and it's definitely a low income.
So your particular zip code that you have concern about is not listed within the demonstrated performance? Okay.
If 78228 was inadvertently replaced with 78229.
I don't believe so, but I think it says in the narrative, I'm not there on the page. What page are you looking at specifically that explains? Page 8?
I looked at the atlas, it doesn't look like 78229 and low income.
I don't believe there was a mistake in outlining that particular zip code. But one of the things that's mentioned here when actually identifying zip codes or any area outside of the Equity Atlas map 7 to 10 is that you can provide information or present a program for a particular area. You just have to provide justification for serving that area. If you believe that this is a need that the city needs to address, you can most assuredly provide information for that particular program. You just need to be able to justify that. That's all. But good question. Any other questions online? Okay. So again, we'll take another look at the Equity Atlas in just a moment. Last thing here that it says population must align with the scope outlined in the RFP, equity score of 7 to 10. We just talked about that. So here we have the actual Equity Atlas, a picture of it. I hesitate to actually go to the map. I'm going to try to go to the map. It was not operating effectively in this particular connection I have, but let's see if we can do that. Just a moment here. All right, so this is the Equity Atlas map. Let's actually explode this so you can see exactly what it looks like. And we talked about this at length yesterday, but this is the map that you're going to be looking at to identify the populations that you're serving and what their Equity Atlas score is. There's several different tabs at the top here: race, income, combined score, education, language, and redlining. You're going to be looking at specifically the combined score. And unfortunately, it's not coming up entirely on the screen here. Are you able to see that at all, Katie, on the screen? You do see the equity? It's not coming up on, some people are not able to see it. Okay. Let's exit this and see if you can see it that way. And I apologize for the clunkiness of this. Hopefully we can get this so you can see it. Are you able to see it now? Okay. But unfortunately, you can't see any of the map. It's kind of coming, well, kind of coming up. Well, okay. Well, that doesn't help a whole lot. Yeah, for some odd reason, it's always kind of difficult to call this map up in real time. Well, what I'm attempting to show you is that this map, there is a map, believe me, in the middle here, and it has various colors, and the colors identify certain populations. You'll be looking for populations that are between the number 7 to 10. You can see that equity matrix overall ranking score, the legend off to the left-hand side, bottom of the screen. Now, the way that this map is set up, the overlay that it uses is an overlay based upon census tracts. Well, how many of you know census tracts? Perhaps not many of you. So you'll be looking at zip codes, right? So let's go back to the slide and I'll show you how to do that. And I'll have to show you from pictures instead of going to the map, unfortunately, but hopefully that'll make sense. So this is how the map looks, how it's supposed to look. As I said, it only shows maps based upon census tracts. There's an actual tool that you can use, an actual website that you can go to, and we listed on this particular page, where you can actually look at interactive maps that show the zip code and match it to the actual score in the Equity Atlas map. So if you go to this particular page, and we have a hyperlink on this page, you can go to this interactive map, type in the area where you see it pointed to on the bottom here, type in the zip code, click find zip code. The table will come up and update all the census tracts within that zip code. Let me see if I can show that here. No, it doesn't do that. But again, some of these are hyperlinked. You can go right to this tool and it will help you overlay the zip code with the Equity Atlas score. Excuse me, I think we have a question. Yeah, we'll provide the link, right? You'll see the link right at the end for this tool. Are they asking for the link for the Equity Atlas map or? Okay, I think they're asking for the links in the chat. We can provide you with that in just a moment. Okay. You'll see within the slides, folks, that there are indeed hyperlinks of the Equity Atlas tool on the slides, but you also have that in the RFP. So question number 2, describe the proposed program services to include a description of the program and identification of the age group and number to be served, along with where the services will be offered, to include specific city council districts. Descriptions should also include zip codes and school districts where services will be offered, along with operating hours and days. Respondents should reference the city's Equity Atlas tool again to determine the equity score for each area of service. If any of the proposed areas of services do not have, and this is what I was talking about before, notice it says this: if any of the areas or any of the proposed areas of service do not have an equity score of 7 to 10, justification must be included as to why services are proposed in that area. So if you can make a valid justification, leverage your argument around why services should need to be offered in that area, please do so. Provide details about the proposed program to include a thorough description of the services provided and the specific service available to that target population. Key details include, but are not limited to, the number of clients who will serve with requested funding, location or locations where services will be provided, the agency, the facility, client home, school, anything like that. Must include specific city district or council districts, zip codes, and or school districts as they apply. Include equity scores for the program services that you're proposing, okay? Question number 3. Identify the number of staff to be assigned to the program and provide an organizational chart for the program. If staff assigned to the program require professional qualifications, include a description of the licensing and certifications which are required. The organizational chart should include all personnel who are assigned to the program. So again, specifically provide the number of all staff and specific type of positions who will be working on this program directly. Remember, this information, unlike the last attachment we looked at, is specific to the program, not the overall agency, but to the program. So who's working on this program? Include any certifications or licensings each position will have. Excuse me. Include leadership positions, overseeing the program staff. Don't forget to include an organizational chart. Ensure all positions, both filled and vacant, are included on the org chart. Any positions listed on the budget should also be included on the org chart. Remember, this is a complete story that you're providing, folks. Don't make them guess as to what goes where. This is an integrated story. So if you have information on the org chart that doesn't match this, it's going to be somehow difficult to match these things. So make sure that what you have in the org chart is matching this information as well. Question number 4. Describe how the proposed program aligns with the long-term outcomes listed in the scope of service section. Explain how the proposed program will impact the community targeted by each outcome and complement the strategies DHS proposes for that outcome. The plan should also describe how the program design is evidence-based and will demonstrate success. The program will demonstrate high impact for the population served. How will the program identify and recruit clients for services? So again, describe the program services and explain specifically how the services directly align with the RFP, again, LTO priority checked on attachment A. We talked about that earlier. Include the specific services available to the target population identified in questions 1 and 2 earlier. Provide an overview of the program's strategies and explain how each strategy and service impact the target population to achieve the specific LTO priority checked on attachment A. Include details on evidence-based strategies and a description of why the evidence-based strategy was selected. Explain the impact your program will have on clients served. Ensure the impact is aligned with the LTO priority that you checked earlier. Explain the recruitment strategies to include marketing efforts, referral networks. Describe how clients are identified and include any eligibility requirements for clients as applied. Any questions? Question number 5. Describe how the agency achieves financial and social returns on investment, ROIs, through implementation of the program. 2 things you're going to be looking at here: social return on investment and financial return on investment, and explain what each of those are and how you should define those. Describe how implementing your program, your proposed program, achieves social ROI. Ways that you could define that is, how much does the problem you address cost society in financial terms? Use credible research results to determine the cost avoided or benefits gained from your agency's work or that particular program. For example, researchers have determined the average cost of a single case of child abuse or the benefits obtained from one person leaving homelessness. There's all sorts of research out on that. You can use those figures to show cost avoided if your nonprofit prevents child abuse or helps one person regain permanent housing. That's simply an example of social ROI. Describe how you're implementing your proposed program achieves financial ROI. And we have a resource here that you can take a look at. It explains, I think, very well exactly how you can formulate or calculate that information. Don't forget to put a value on volunteer efforts, in-kind donations, those sorts of things. Question number 6. The city supports collaboration to build capacity among participating nonprofit agencies. There are 2 different types of collaborations that are outlined here: informal collaborations and formal collaborations. Explain how your agency collaborates with other community organizations. How do you gain collective impact in the society or in the organization or really in the community that you're serving? It may include any or all established collaborations between your agency and others. Ensure any collaborations specific to the proposed program are included and highlight these particular collaborations. There was a question earlier, I believe yesterday, about do you have to submit to the MOUs or any types of agreements that you have with other partners in your proposal? No, you do not. Do not waste space in including those, but you may be asked for those not proposals, but MOUs or other partnership agreements at a later date, either by the city or before awarded or when awarded. Looking at the 4th bullet here, I believe the 4th bullet, yes, explain how these collaborations enhance the services for the clients and maximizes the resources. Do not need to include, and I already mentioned this, you don't need to include any copies of the MOUs or agreements that you have. Question number 7. Describe the program's process of self-assessment and continuous improvement. How's the program being evaluated for effectiveness? How do you do that periodically? How is it evaluated for areas of improvement? Key points to include is how frequently, how periodically the program is evaluated. What are you looking at specifically? When areas of improvement are identified, what is the process for addressing these and implementing actions appropriately? Any questions online? Question number 8. RFP Attachment F, Performance Measurement Scorecard, Part 1 and Part 2. As I said earlier, we're going to have a very detailed conversation and deep dive into this area tomorrow. So I'll hold off on this particular conversation and not steal the city's thunder for communicating all of the necessary elements of this tomorrow. So again, I encourage you to join us tomorrow for a deep explanation of the performance scorecard measurements. Question number 9. The city has implemented Ready to Work, which is an education and job placement program. Respondents can learn more about this initiative at Ready to Work, and you have the website there, whose goal is to connect residents to career opportunities. Describe how you can leverage this initiative in your training and hiring practices. Explain how the proposed program leverages this particular initiative. An example here that I put is that your program impacts LTO 1, Priority 3, college, career, and military readiness. Explain how your program might partner with this initiative to assess clients' needs, skills, and interests. Plan finances, develop a personalized career plan. Okay. All right, that concludes section or attachment E. Let's take another 5-minute break before we go to the last attachment, attachment G, the budget. And in that time period, I'll see if there's any other questions online and get back to everyone. Another 5 minutes, folks. Welcome back, everyone. So we've completed attachment C, attachment E, and we're to our final challenging attachment, which is attachment G, the budget. So as you can see, what we'll be looking at is three different items: the total agency and total program budget, which is one tab on the Excel sheet that we'll be looking at. The second tab is the year one line item budget. The third tab is the year two line item budget. Remember, or please keep in mind, this is a 3-tab document. Be sure to actually complete each of the tabs. Oh, let me go back just a bit. Some folks had asked about the links for the Equity Atlas, as well as the overlay tool that allows you to convert zip codes to census tracts. That should have been included in the chat feature. I've also made those available on the slides in the PowerPoint presentation. So located on tab number 1 of attachment G are two items that you'll need to be looking at: the total agency budget and the total program budget. The total agency budget is all funding available to the agency each year. This is an agency-wide budget and not specific to only the proposed program. It covers fiscal year FY 2021, 22, and 23. The fiscal year is based upon a period of October 1st through September 30th. Excuse me. Agency historical revenue and expenses for FY 21 and 22 provide an overview of the financials for the past 2 years. FY 2023 projected revenue and expenses reflect how funds are or will be spent this year until September 30th. Regarding the total program budget, all funding available to the proposed program over a 2-year term may include both COSA funds or City of San Antonio funds, consolidated funding, and funding from other resources or sources. It provides evaluation members an overview of the funds available to the program to support services. If requesting funds to expand an already existing program, then the total budget or program budget should reflect both the requested funding and the existing fundings or existing funds. If program is already funded by other COSA funding, not from this RFP, then include funding under other resources. And I'll show you exactly how that looks. Let me reiterate something that I said earlier. Excuse me, folks. Remember, your proposal is an integrated whole. Everything should match. So when we talk about the program or we talk about the budget and you're describing funds for a particular position, if we don't see that position, if the city doesn't see that position outlined in, for example, all of the different positions on the program or needed for the program, there's going to be a disconnect there. The panel is literally looking at all three of these not proposals, but all three of these sections and comparing them. So make sure you're telling an integrated, comprehensive, concise story, okay? Each thing has to agree. So looking at the total agency budget, this is the top portion of that first tab. You can see a number of different things here. Obviously, it has in red, don't forget your name, the name of the agency. Sometimes that has happened. If you look at the left-hand side, you see all of the funding sources. Funding should be listed based upon the funding source that you see listed on the left-hand side. At the bottom, number 8, you see other listed below. Additional sources can be added as well. So you have both columns, actual agency budget revenue for 21, 22, in this case, actual or estimated agency budget for 2023. So again, the top portion of that first slide or that first tab is your total agency budget. One moment, I think we have a question. Just for clarification, if our fiscal year is different than the cities, we are going to need to convert those budget and project projects to the city's fiscal year. Is that correct? I believe that's correct. Let me get the validation on that. Did you hear that question, Natalie? The question is this. Just for clarification, if our fiscal year is different than the city's, we are going to need to convert those budget and projects to the city's fiscal year. Is that correct?
Actually, I think yes. They would need to convert it so that it operates from the October to September.
Yes.
Can you speak loud?
I'm sorry. Yes, that is correct. We would want you to convert it just so that it's easier for them to see from that October to September period. What it'd be looking like. And again, these are we're looking for your actual agency in those prior fiscal years, but a big question we get is on estimated and projected. They are just that. We're asking y'all to estimate, to project out, to give us a better idea, because if you're elected for funding, we'll actually give you an updated one to fill out when we get closer to the contract award period. Because we understand these things change. They're going to fluctuate, as you go through it. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I do want to point out that under the other, in this entire section, the real focus here should be that this is your agency budget on this top one. This is specific to your agency as a whole, not what you're requesting for funding from us for your program. That's at the bottom section. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Natalie. So the bottom portion, again, the top portion, as Natalie stated, was your total agency budget. That's the concentration and focus of that top portion. We're still on the first tab. Now we're looking at the total program budget. Now you have on the side here, amounts in each category should match, as we talked about before, tabs 1, 2, and 3. Remember, this is a 3-tab document. This tab talks about the total agency budget as well as the total program budget. But in tabs 1 or tabs 2 and 3, you'll be looking at a line item budget for year 1 and then year 2. Do we have another question? So to be clear, FY24, COSA begins on October 1st, 2023. Yes, that is correct. So on the left-hand side, you have the individual cost categories. Let me see if I can go to the next slide, or this slide, I think it is, and kind of point that out. Let me actually go to the RFP, and maybe this might be a little bit clearer. And I'll try to call up the Excel sheets as well. So again, when looking at that first tab, you have two things that we'll be looking at: the total agency budget, as well as the total program budget. Let me call up the tab itself. Let's see, this works here. All right, we have success. So let me explode this a bit just so that you can see what we're referring to. So as you can see here, let me see that on the screen. We have 3 different tabs at the bottom: your total agency and program budget. So let me explode that just a bit more. At the top, we have the total agency and program budget. We just looked at that. And we have the total program budget. Now, these particular line item costs need to also be included in this upper portion on tab 1 and tab 2. So you see personnel, fringe benefits, so forth and so on. The same questions that are being asked in these columns. They need to match. Okay. Let's go back to the slides. All right, looking at the total program budget, we're still on tab 1 of that document. You can see we have year 1 and year 2. We have the columns of cost categories. Again, they should match the same cost categories or same amounts that you have in both tab 2 and 3 of the budget year line item report. In year 1 and year 2, they basically mirror each other in terms of the columns. You have that first column that I think I have a red square around. It says requested funding should be in the COSA column. And this other sources indicates any other funding, including non-consolidated COSA funding, that supports the same program. These should be listed in that column. At the bottom there, you see the total COSA amounts should be matching or should match columns 2, or I should say tabs 2 and 3. So we talk about that and we reiterate that several times so that you can understand that this is a collective whole. All of the numbers should match. I think we have another question. For consistency purposes, how do you want administrative costs depicted on the different tabs? I think you're talking about the particular line item. Do you have a statement for that, Natalie? Yeah.
Something, if you, do you have the Excel that you can? Pull
Yes,
up
let's
real
pull up
quick?
the Excel real quick.
Let me clarify a couple of things, because the admin question came up. Y'all are going to notice in your budget narrative, we have a section at the bottom that says to talk about your admin costs. But we don't have a cost category for it, because the reality is your admin costs can be split throughout your cost categories. In other words, for personnel, we don't ask you at this level of the RFP, but if you go over here, Clarence, and click on budget narrative year 1
Okay.
and scroll down to where it talks about admin costs. So you have this section here. This admin cost, though, can actually be talking about, in other words, if you budget 100,000 personnel costs, it may be that you're paying for a program director at 50,000 a year. That person is a program cost. But you might also include in that $100,000 total budget that you're paying 10% of your CFO because you're going to cost allocate the time the CFO spends on this program. That would be an admin cost, right? So at the RFP level, we don't ask you to break it out. If you're funded, we'll give you a program line item budget that will break out personnel where you'll select program and admin. For the purposes of your RFP proposal, you would simply include 100,000 in personnel. And then when you're talking about admin costs right here on the budget narrative G, you're going to say of personnel, 15,000 is allocated for admin costs that will be for our CFO. That's why this doesn't have a direct correlation into the total agency and program budget. You can add the amount here if you want, but you'll notice one of the things we did this year is we don't even allow you to fill in the section that says COSA with the amount. If you go to the budget narrative and you go to personnel services and you type in up on top, at the very top, right here under personnel, if you put 100,000 in that yellow box, it is going to automatically filter down into all of the other cells. We're only giving you one opportunity to put it in so that it can be consistent across your budget for you. This was a learning experience for us. So Clarence, if you clicked on this cell right here next to personnel and you typed 100,000 and then just hit enter, you're going to see how it automatically flows here. And then if you go back to total agency and program budget, this top sheet, it's automatically here. Okay. And you'll notice the same is going to happen with budget narrative year 2. It's going to flow over into the COSA for year 2. We did that as a learning experience because we saw in the last RFP that some of our agencies unintentionally, you work on this at different times, they had different amounts, and it was very hard for the panel to figure out what was the final total program cost. So we only allow you to enter in the amounts once on the budget narratives at the very top. That's why we did a shading of yellow in the Excel to kind of show those are all the cells y'all enter. If it's not shaded yellow, you shouldn't have to enter anything. Yes, ma'am.
So does doing the budget that way between program and not including the administrative costs and the line items, but only in the narrative, help alleviate the restriction of indirect costs? Or should we still be kind of mindful of a percentage that we are allocating to admin?
It depends on what you choose to use. We will offer you 2 options, right? So at the proposal level, we want like a summary, right? So if you have an indirect cost rate that you've already had approved by an authorizing agency, let's say it's 10%, 15%, you can put that in the administrative narrative. You would explain, we're going to use, if we get awarded, we're going to use our indirect cost rate that's already been approved by a cognizant agency. If you're not, though, you don't have to use that. If you opt to, the city allows you to have up to 20% of your budget for admin costs. So this is something that you'll have to decide which is something better for your program, right? Because in some cases, depending, especially if you're proposing a new program, you might have a lot of admin costs. You may want to use that full 20%. Now, the caveat to that is if you're one of the few agencies who get federal funding, they have more restrictive limits that we can't override. Those are statutory. So like HOPWA funding, I think it's either 7%, and I think ESG is 7. One of them is 7, one of them is 5. But for the most part, everybody who gets general fund, we're going to give you up to 20%. With ARPA, we had actually increased it to 30.
Wait, I'm sorry, do they explain, I want to make sure I understood, do they explain that delineation within the narrative portion, or is that necessary to explain that?
Like if they're allocating admin?
Yes, exactly.
I
How
would
they're doing
put it in there. In other words, again, you don't need to put it so detailed, like kind of, I always say there's the way the accountant does it, and then there's the way a program person does, where we kind of summarize a little bit more high level. I would summarize it a little bit more, but it's good to explain to them because it tells them you have a solid understanding. One of the things they're evaluating is, are you financially sound, right? And is that demonstrated throughout your proposal? That's why how Clarence is talking to about an integrated proposal. All of that testifies to the panel of how well written and really how well thought out is your program design. That's what they're looking at. So I would definitely, the level of detail you want to put ultimately is up to you. But in the budget narrative, you're only going to put in amounts for these 1, 2, 3. And we do ask you to put it because you can list the admin costs separately, but it's not going to factor into that other program budget. And so you could, if you decide to include the admin costs in that 100, like I said, here we have 100,000. You could either separate it out. If you only know a ballpark figure of this 100,000, 20,000 is going to be admin cost. Then you can put that 20,000 here and bring this 100,000 down to 80,000. And you would list that in the paragraph. And that's not going to carry over because we recognize that that's admin cost. Alternatively, you could decide to put 100,000 here because maybe you're not sure it's exactly 20,000. And you might put in the admin cost paragraph. We do plan on having some admin costs, but maybe only about 5. You have some flexibility there. At the end of the day, the goal is always explain your rationale, your reasoning for why you do what you do. The panels, I kid you not, they actually put a lot of effort into reading these proposals. They want to know, they like looking at them and kind of saying, hey, this is a really good program. I hope that helps answer. And I recognize we're trying to work this out a little bit better. After we release this RFP, we recognize that we could probably add a little bit more explanation. So we're constantly, the city is constantly refining its process. We're learning as we go as well.
Thank you, Natalie. We have another question. Perhaps this might go to what you just explained, Natalie. In the spreadsheet, should administrative personnel and contractor costs be placed in those categories, or should they be listed under administrative costs? That
Is it a contractor?
is contractor. So they have a separate section for that, contractual and
Absolutely.
personnel.
So Clarence, you're absolutely right. If you have a contractor, if you scroll down in the narrative to the contractual section, we give you some descriptions. So if you are actually, and this has been something, if you're an existing agency, where even this year, Katie can testify, we had some back and forth on our intent to subcontract forms. But for contractual services, you should include, if, for example, part of your program is tutoring, and you're going to engage with another agency who's actually going to deliver the tutoring, you're going to subcontract with them, right? You would include them under contractual because you're going to actually have a contract or a legal document to evidence the relationship and governance between you and your subcontractor. Now, in some cases, you actually have maybe you have a contract with your auditor, right? Not a full contract, but you know what I mean? You sign up and you bring in an audit agency to conduct your yearly audit. You would still list them under contractual because it's a fees to pro. This is where it can get a little bit confusing. We're not going to ask you for a contract because it's more of an admin contract cost, but it's considered a fees to professional services. If you're going to cost allocate some of your audit, which you most definitely can, if you're going to cost allocate some of the IT costs for a database that you're running, you want to list it under here, under the contractual, because this is including your fees to pros. Any type of professional services, we're going to kind of put under here. And again, keep in mind, it's a summary level. I don't want any of y'all to feel like you're so completely locked in, because when you get awarded a contract, we give you a detailed program line item budget where now you're going to break it out and actually say who's the name of the audit agency and how much are you giving them, and is this program or admin cost, how are we allocating it? But at the RFP level, we kind of want an overview of, if you're saying 50,000 or 60,000, how's that roughly going to be broken out? Maybe you have 20,000 going to a subcontractor. Maybe you have 5,000 that you already know you want to send over to equipment rental fees. Alarm and security. So that's how you would use that one.
Seems we have a number of questions on the finances here. On our current COSA program budget, those items are in their respective categories, but the spreadsheet includes them as part of the administrative percentage. So are they seeing a conflict there?
So I can answer that because Clarence doesn't see the actual sheet that y'all are referencing.
Yes,
but I know
I'm
which one
not
you're
able to.
talking about. If you have an existing consolidated funding or ARPA contract, what that question is talking about is you get a program line item budget, and there's a section that says fees to pros. Within that fees to pros, there's a box where you get to list per line item, right? Like auditor. Then it asks you to say, is this program or admin? At the RFP level, we are not asking for that level detail to break out. So you would use the guidance that we've given you in the RFP, because again, this is your proposal. We're still going to have time to negotiate the contract once we come to it. So even if you accidentally listed your auditor under contractual and we later give you the program line item and say, you know what, now we've decided that's a commodity, and that's not true. I'm just using an example. We can adjust it in your final budget. But for the RFP, you want to write it based on the instructions we've given you within this. So you would simply put that in the contractual as a summary. If you know you're going to classify it because of your experience with us, that you intend to classify it as admin, then you most definitely can say, well, I know for a fact it's 5,000. Then I want to put it in admin. This is where your proposals are going to be different depending on your time and experience with the city. Some of you have existing contracts, so you look at this and you're thinking, wait, I've already seen a program line item budget. I already have this level of detail. You can add it if you want to this, where there's sections available, but is it required? No, it is not. This is not a program line item budget. This is a budget narrative. We really want to hear in a narrative format of what your plan is based on your budget to bring about the program you've just talked to us about in the attachment E, I think, for the program plan.
Yes,
So I hope that answers the question online.
I believe so. Looks like we have a number of questions on finances. If we already are providing an existing senior program from the last DHS Consolidated funding, can we increase the salaries of current staff members in this new budget request?
So I was trying to whisper to Clarence. And be like,
Yeah, I know.
So essentially the question appears, and I'm just going to summarize at high level, which is if you already have an existing senior program that's funded, they want to know if they can increase the salaries of the current staff in the budget request. Can you also add staff members? If we have previously funded you, when that contract comes to an end on September 30th, that contract is over. If you have the exact same program, no matter what long-term outcome, senior center or not, and you're proposing it again, you are not obligated to have the exact same funding structure or budget structure as you did in a prior one. In fact, I would question it if you did, because all of us know that inflation has been at roughly, 9%? So we anticipate agencies will have higher salary costs. We anticipate that we will see fluctuations in that because the cost to produce something is no longer the same as it was, say, 2 years ago when we did the last RFP. So in answer to that question, yes, you can increase the number of staff. Yes, you can increase the number of salaries. But ultimately, the takeaway for all of you is that whatever contract you had in the past for your program, you're not locked into that same budget. You're proposing the new narrative and the new budget based on the circumstances your agency is in now in order to tell us what will it take for you to produce that program today.
So in this case, they're referencing the same program, a previous program that was approved. Okay. All right.
But we recognize, like salary costs are increasing
Okay.
to be competitive. Yes, ma'am.
So, budget will obviously be different, but, and this might have go back to program language and stuff, but if the program's the same and goals are the same and, you know, outcome metrics and all that stuff are the same, you don't need to see like a whole huge rewritten narrative because it's all the same.
Here's the thing. That I'm going to leave, that I would tell you is entirely up to your discretion. Here's why. The people who evaluate your proposal are not the people who monitor your contract. So if you have a previous program funded by the city and you're not changing any of those elements, your proposal doesn't have to change it. In other words, nobody from the city, from your contracts division, is looking at your proposal to say, you offer the exact same program, scope of work, now you've changed the money. It's not going to happen like that. Your proposal is going to a diverse evaluation panel of people who are from the community. You might have a handful of city staff on there, but they're not even the people who monitor your contract. So I just want to clarify that answer, because you can keep all your outcomes the same. You can keep your proposed metrics the same because you've already built something that works for you. Your budget's changing because the costs are increasing and you've got to adjust that. That's completely logical. But I would not want anybody to walk away saying, so then I don't have to explain that much about my program. Do not fall into that. I don't know if it's a rabbit hole. Don't fall into that hole, because it's not the contracts team. Like, your monitor knows your program like the back of their hand. But the evaluation panel, you have people with lived experience. They might be formerly homeless. You need to write your proposal for the audience that I would always tell people, write for the audience that you know that you're going to have, which I would assume you're going to have an audience who doesn't know your program, right? So I hope that answers your question. I just didn't want somebody to hear that and think, oh, wait, I can just assume they got me down. And I'm like, no, don't assume that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much, Natalie. Some great questions, folks. So a lot of these concerns and questions were answered on this particular slide regarding the total program budget. We're moving to an area that we just talked about at length, but let's cover it anyway. The program line item budget. You can see there the total amounts for COSA year 1, year 2, in this particular in this case, year 1 column. So a lot of these areas, the areas that you need to pay particular attention to, are the yellow highlighted areas. And you can see how these numbers will be transferred over. I think Natalie explained that at length. So on the program line item budget, just so that we're clear, these are some of the topics that will be covered on that budget. Personnel and fringe. The key points in this particular column or in this particular category is each position that would be paid with the requested funding. I'm going to repeat again. Remember, this is an integrated whole story that you're talking about, that you're telling. So in your narrative and in your other positions that you're or in your other explanations of the program, when you talk about personnel, when you talk about certain costs, certain things that are fixed in that area, make sure that those things also appear in the narrative and also the cost in the program budget. Total agency, not total agency, but the program budget in this case. So again, this is an integrated whole. Make sure that the entire story agrees. I think Natalie said correctly and beautifully that remember, people that don't know your program are evaluating your program. So submit it as a new program, something that no one else has ever seen. The percentage, talking again about personnel and fringe, the percentage of the salary that would be paid with funds. Natalie also gave a detailed explanation on that. A short explanation of the position will do, and justification for why the position should be paid with these funds. List the type of fringe benefits and the percentage of cost to the budget in this particular case. The contractual information, Natalie gave a detailed explanation on that. It says list all the contractual expenses to include professional and non-professional services that would be paid with these funds. Looking at commodities, include any supplies necessary for program services, planning to use these funds to pay for such costs. If computer software is needed, for example, include the number of licensings that you'll need for that particular program. And then any fixed charges. List any appropriate utilities and specific amounts for each particular category that funding would support. If using funds for direct assistance to clients, specify the exact type of direct assistance. Is it for rent, utilities, food, and the amount of assistance? So these are the areas that you need to pay particular concern about. So what did we cover? We covered a number of different things. Looking at the beginning, we talked about attachment C, the experience, background, and qualifications. Attachment E, the proposed program plan. And attachment G, the budget and budget narrative. I knew there would be a number of questions on the budget and budget narrative. That tends to be the more explored area, the more concerned area. But again, I want to reiterate what has been said numerous times, that this is an integrated whole. Think about the folks that are actually reading your material. They perhaps in many cases have never seen your program. They don't know it in great detail. So you need to make sure that there are not a lot of questions or gaping holes in the narrative or the story that you're telling about your program. Any other questions in-house or internally? Natalie, is there anything else you would like to say in closing? One sec, I think there is one last question. How do we know if the city would want to increase the number of services provided at senior centers in FY 24-25 that we are currently providing through current contract, such as the number of morning fitness classes? Can we go ahead and request funding to offer more fitness classes or keep at the same amount? That gets into the more specifics that you would not normally want to I think as a city employee actually talk about. You would actually want to research that on your own, correct?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And I think the other thing is that if you're currently providing fitness classes and you have the capacity to do more, I would recommend you submit a proposal that shows that. Because sometimes the other thing you can also do in that scenario is you can reach out to our senior centers, like the ones that you're currently working at. You can't ask them, like Clarence is saying, you can't be specific about your proposal, but what you can do is reach out to them, your contacts there, and say, do y'all have a need for more fitness classes? If so, how many would you anticipate? That is not specific to your proposal. They're not giving you guidance on your proposal. You're simply doing a needs assessment of the community that you want to serve. That you can reach out to the senior centers and ask, because that may help you craft your proposal. Alternatively, if you have the capacity to do more, nothing prohibits you from simply submitting the proposal saying, we have the capacity to do more and we'd like to do more. And this is what the cost would be if y'all fund us.
Well, that concludes our portion for today. Natalie, do you have anything in closing? Sorry.
And we're ending up proposal about this, and we submit in the budget, but we don't know where it's both, and that be adjusted after the fact.
It would depend on what you mean by adjusted. So I would assume right now, if you have a proposal pending for another RFP, I would think the best way to operate is to assume you are not getting it. In other words, submit a proposal assuming you don't have it. So if you ask for us in consolidated funding, 100,000, and you could even put this in your proposed program plan, you could say, we're currently asking for 100,000 for year one, 100,000 for year two. However, we have a pending proposal, and if we should get that proposal, we may actually only need 75. The reason I say you want to put something like that in is because that also helps the panel see, hey, wait, here's an agency who's leveraging. Do you see what I'm saying? You're coming for this funding source, you're coming for that. And it already sets the tone that if we do fund you for the full 200, and let's say you got ARPA funding, we could, doing negotiations, you could let us know, you know what? We either only need the 75,000, or alternatively, if we give you the 200, we might ask you to say, well, since you got that funding, maybe you can serve a little bit more. If you could only serve 100 kids off 200,000, maybe if we gave you 100, and 25 or whatever because of the ARPA, you could actually increase that. So we can negotiate that.
Natalie, there's a very specific question here that I would not know. It's regarding this person's personal experience, I guess. To follow up on the question about rewriting application narratives, some funders will, quote unquote, penalize applicants for not using fresh language in the narrative, meaning that if we don't change the language in this particular proposal, even though it's the same program, they might be penalized. They want to see, quote unquote, fresh language. Are you aware of anything like that, or?
I think that's actually something really good that the person asking the question is aware of. I had not, sorry, we're having some background noise. I think somebody's moving.
Upstairs.
No, it's upstairs, I think, or somewhere behind us. It's not you. Yeah. No, it's not you. Yeah, I think it's actually right outside us over here. That is actually, though, the reality is that's up to your decision. That's your discretion to make. I can't really guide you on that. I could see the value of being concerned about that. But at the end of the day, we don't even know fully yet how the panel that's going to look at your proposal. So if that's a concern you have, I would say you should probably factor that in. Have I ever been told that that's something that people specifically look at? I have not. But that's not to say it couldn't happen, because the panels change every different RFP. We get different people on the panel.
I have a quick question, to just clarify the amount requested, you want the total amount for the 2 years, contract year.
Correct. So like if you're looking at the attachment, that's the scorecard where it says amount requested for 2 years, that amount should match the attachment G budget where you have the 2 years. And keep in mind, it's what you're requesting from COSA. So like if you're requesting 100,000 for year 1, 100,000 for year 2, you've got other funders for that same program who are going to give you 100,000. You're not going to list 400,000 for the 2 years. You're going to list 200,000 because your ask from us is 200,000. That's what we want focused on.
Okay. Well, that concludes our session today. I hope this was very helpful to you. Any other questions in-house?
The only other thing I'll throw out there is we do have a session tomorrow that's going to be very specific to attachment. I think it's F, the performance measures. We have DHS staff who will be coming, but because some of y'all have already set in on 2 sessions, sometimes you don't have a question until the day after. Or I know I'm like that. Sometimes it doesn't come to me until after some time's passed. If y'all do have a question, even with these past ones, we can address them tomorrow. So feel very comfortable if you've set in on a session, you go back, you look, you talk to your development person, and y'all kind of look at this and say, wait a minute, we weren't sure about this or that. Come back tomorrow, and when we start out the session, we can even open it up to say, does anybody have any questions from the last 2? Just to give y'all that room, because I know it doesn't always come to me immediately. It takes a little bit.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope this was very helpful. Good luck on your proposals.
Thank you. Bye-bye.